Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today we are going to be going over the Gems of War Riddle Me This event, in which the Gynosphinx is added to the game, and this thing is actually pretty good. We'll be getting around to it in a moment. We also have an Evasion event this week, and pretty noteworthy, we still have two Mythics available right now. One of them is still the Mythic from last Friday. It is in the Glory Gem Guild and VAP chest drop table, and even though there's no timer here, it is all the way until Friday reset time, so basically the end of Thursday. Definitely highly advise getting at least one of these, if not two, if not potentially three. No need for four though. But getting some of these, very, very good. Really great mana accumulation, really good damage source, and it'll make Missa skills a lot easier whenever we finally get that event again. Aside from that, technically, the campaign Mythic is finally available today. We'll be going over it tonight on stream. For the most part, it's basically just weaker Catches the Bull with a little bit of mana accumulation. I don't think it's going to see too much usage, but I don't know. We haven't messed around with it yet, so we'll go see what it could do later. However, one thing that we can mess with now that is very, very, very good is the Gynosphinx. So this thing, of course, you can buy for glory. Stock up on it. You can end up getting a lot of blue, yellow arcanes, as they're only 200 each if you need them. As far as the troop itself, it has the best lightning gem mechanic in the entire game at the moment, even more so than the Mythic, more so than anything we've had so far. It reminds me a lot of Daughter of Time, actually, and how useful it's actually going to ultimately be. Actually has a pretty similar ability overall as well. It jumbles the board, that it doesn't have, but it jumbles the board. This is very similar to the Sphinx that already does this for 7 mana costs, however, while gaining an extra turn. However, the big difference is for 5 higher mana costs, it gets to create 5 lightning gems. These can either be yellow lightning gems or blue lightning gems. Great thing about that, it uses both yellow and blue, which are, its 2 corresponding colors. So it'll always be able to go and mana accumulate into this when jumbling. Of course, you can gain other mana while jumbling. Other things could end up getting aligned for 4 times and 5 times that you can end up swiping for. However, the other thing that this can end up doing, though, of course, is the lightning gems themselves, of course. The blue ones destroy horizontally, the yellow ones vertically, and that also will give you a wide range of mana accumulation. So you're not only gaining yellow and blue whenever you do this. While it is doing yellow and blue, and could potentially feed back into itself, it is also creating essentially every single color, or not every single color, but every single amount of mana accumulation. So it has a lot of potential going forward. One of the weirdest things on it, though, which I'm not sure if they changed their color last minute or what's up with this, but it does gain Stone Link. This is obviously helpful on some teams, especially if you're on like any kind of barrier on brown team, which is weird because the hero class from this place isn't one of those. However, yeah, it does have Stone Link, which is just some extra brown mana. A little bit of an extra mana to gain when you're primarily only doing yellow and blue with the troop, but yeah, it does have that. Most noteworthy thing it is missing, though, is unlike the other Sphinx, it does not have Impervious. But it does have Immune to Silence, at least, so kept at least one of the good immunities. I do want to go show this troop real quick, just because this is a little bit of a unique mechanic. Obviously, we've had lightning gems this entire season, and tomorrow, or next week, is the final week of the season as well. Hey, I know. But let's just go show this real quick. This is a somewhat new mechanic as far as what it ultimately ends up doing. I do kind of want to get 2 of these to full mana first if we can. I don't really have a proper mana accumulation team here. But you know what? Let's see if we can get away with it with the first one. No, we cannot. We can try for yellow from Sky, though. Oh, no, never mind. It's already in sight. But let's go get that back. Can we do anything here? Come on, I want my last little bit of mana here. Obviously, we already have the win condition. I'm just trying to get it up a little bit so we can kind of see how it does. So we'll go for its little thing here, and obviously we can take whatever extra turns are available. Really good for any kind of team that wants to spam a lot of extra turns. You need to kind of just evaluate what you have, take something if you want to take it. Otherwise, go for another one. See what you have. Ideally, have extra turns. Why does it feel like we're getting like no extra turns right now when we're trying to show it? However, given how lightning gems work, we are going to almost full board clear when we take something like this. So if I go to this, we're going to get a lot of the board cleared out. We already got more mana than what we even started with there. And yeah, you can kind of just keep doing that over and over again. As you can see, some of our jumbles also immediately get connected. This is because even though a jumble will leave your board in a way that you will never have a direct match, the lightning gems don't care about that, so they kind of just spawn wherever. So you can still actually land them for a 3 and other similar things. That kind of completely ignores the other mechanic, basically. But overall, yeah, honestly, I do think they're a little bit weaker than Daughter of Time as far as what will ultimately be used for in the future. But it's definitely not bad. And as far as jumble mechanics are concerned, if you really want that, jumble mechanics mostly used for extra turn spamming. So anything that has a team that really wants to land their extra turn perk multiple times. Obviously, there are plenty of ways to do it with gem spawning and everything else. But jumbling into gem creation is a pretty good way of doing it as well. So another angle that you can go with it. Definitely a decent troop. Not going to see a lot of usage, but definitely will find its way as a utility troop, and is a really low rarity thing. It's basically free as of this current week if you go get it through the current event thing. and through to 400 glory. And of course, in the future, it's also really easy to obtain. It is only a epic rarity troop, which is not the easiest of rarities, but low enough that it's not going to be that hard to end up getting. So an overall pretty decent kind of utility mana accumulator to go into the pile of ones that will eventually come out into the future. But anyways, as far as other things we have going on this week, the event key drop table is not too good compared to the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chests. You definitely want to be prioritizing those, as until this Friday reset, you will be able to go get the new Takshaka, and he is absurdly good and should be your priority for keys. However, if you do have yourself some event keys, you'll be getting, of course, the Kedar drop table. Everything that you see here, except for the following, are in the drop table. The troops that are not in drop table are the 5 faction troops, and now that I'm looking at it, I think that's it. Never mind, just the 5 faction troops. So anything that says Fang Moor is not in drop table here, in the event keys. However, everything else is. Is it worth spending event keys this week? Not really. Unless you're looking to get a Kingdom Star level or just some kind of utility troop for the week. Not really much here. I guess Keeper of Souls, it's a good, well-rounded early game skull spammer. They kind of run through the whole game if you really want to. Not used as much these days, but still a really controlled way of putting skulls onto the board to this day, despite being one of the OG ways of doing it. There's not much. The mythics here aren't really needed. They are used for a couple things this week. Like this thing has Death Mark per extra turn. This thing still has the high soul gain in the entire game. Though with how gnomes and vault events work these days, there isn't as much of a need for this compared to back in the day when it was very vital and even like one of the first things you would get. But nowadays you try focusing on like double Ironhawk, triple Ironhawk before you'd really care about Ferris Raws. And in the current state of the game, there isn't really much of a need to go out of your way to soul farm. Maybe like super early in the game. But there's just so many ways to passively gain souls now that you don't really need to go for them as directly as you need to in the past, which is when he came into the game, was when, you know, you actually needed to soul farm. But nowadays, it's not as much of a mechanic, and there's not too many good soul boost ratio troops that can really utilize it much. Though that is one thing he is used for. And then there's Rafaman, which is a weird little bit of soul creation, or soul boost, between necromancy and just a soul gain, while having an okay skull spam. This actually used to be on Divine Ishbala. It's one of the things that got nerfed off her. The ability to create skulls while also having cleanse, while also having gems put onto the board. Basically, they gave it to Rafaman instead, and oddly enough, still kind of the same colors with the yellow, red, and everything, except just adding purple. So it's kind of like pre-nerfed Divine Ishbala, just with a higher mana cost and different way that it spawns them, instead of a double convert. But the biggest issue with him is generally his mana cost. Compared to other skull spammers, he actually has a relatively high mana cost relative to what he does. But he does have that 4 times cleanse, which is pretty nice to get rid of entangle, freeze, stuff like that, while still having an okay ratio of purple and skulls, giving him a pretty good extra turn rate, even more so than Wild Queen and Wild King. However, despite that, Wild Queen and Wild King are normally used instead of him. Even though they lack the cleanse, they make up for it by having a huge attack gain, even more so in the case of the King. However, this guy is a little bit slow a lot of times. You can still use him. We probably will be for Underspire this week if you happen to have him. However, of course, you do have alternatives like Keeper of Souls and such, which I would say if you're targeting anything, if you have literally no skull spammer from this place, like you're literally running Skeleton right now as your skull spammer, then yeah, you probably want to get at least Keeper of Souls, but Mythic's pretty skippable unless you're just looking for Kingdom Stars. Kedar is currently like many kingdoms, where it is basically stun locked at 26 forever. If I'm not mistaken, this is a purple kingdom, which means you are never going to upgrade this place. There are 4 magic purple kingdoms in the game, all of which should be upgraded before you even think about doing Kedar. And I don't think a single person in the game has 4 of the purple magic kingdoms upgraded yet. So this thing is basically permanently stuck at 26 stars, as is almost every kingdom these days, it feels like. Anyways, aside from that, guild-related event, we have our Self-Invasion. Invasion is pretty straightforward. Make sure to use one of the event troop. Not only does it do double damage on its ability, but it also gives you double the score. This also means you technically do not need to upgrade the troop. You simply just need 1 copy on your team in order to get the maximum amount of score. It is not like a few other modes like Bounty Hunter the other weekend, or Journey, I meant to say. It's not like those other modes where the amount of score bonus is based on its ascension. While it does gain more damage and everything with higher ascension, and is generally advised for these kind of modes, especially if you're farming pretty deep. As far as getting maximum score, it is not required to upgrade this thing at all. You can literally just plop it in, unleveled, untraded on everything, and it'll still give you the maximum amount of points. You do generally want to upgrade it so it'll fend a little bit better, but it is not required to get the full amount of score for it. With that being said, you technically only need to get up to tier 3. This gives you 1 copy of the troop, as well as the weapon, which you might as well get, as it's a pretty cheap way to go get the weapon, compared to getting it in Soul Forge. If you want to run more than one of it, you have to bare minimum buy up to tier 4, as this would allow you to run double or triple, or not really quadruple. That'd be a little overkill. That will allow you to run double or triple if you so choose. Otherwise, you'll be stuck to 1. However, there is a different invasion troop that we could use from one of the past events, so you can end up using... Do I have it here? No, I don't have it on this team. I showed it on the Low Rarity team, but there is a... actually, we can show it right here if we type in invasion. There is a secondary troop. Never mind, not invasion. I mean tower. Tower. There's a sharp tooth guy. Well, he doesn't have double magic. He does, assuming you have him fully maxed, still have 5 times skull damage to the towers, as well as 5 times damage to the towers. But unlike her, it won't have the double magic. In this event, she would end up having 110, in my case, you know, whatever double that is. Whereas he would still be at his base value. It still gets multiplied by 5, both of their numbers, but she's effectively doing twice as much on ability. But you can still end up doing this. He still does his full amount of skull damage, and even with half the amount of damage, that is still a lot of damage. So if you don't want to buy multiple of her, you can end up like doubling up on this and go like her into some of these, and then like some kind of mana accumulation option like wand or anything else you want to run. So there's another option. Though we do a box strider, so that kind of covers over mana accumulation. But it is another alternative if you don't want to go buy into the additional tier there. But if you do, you can double cast her for a very high amount of damage. Aside from that, as far as other events that we have going on throughout the week, this Tuesday we have ourselves the faction event for Fang Moor, which is a blue-red restriction. Wednesday we're going to be having ourselves the Sphinx pet, which is a Kedar bonus. Thursday we're going to have the Necromancer class. Not the worst class. It's generally overshadowed by a lot of other things that's in the game. Very rarely is it really used unless you want like that very small amount of soul boost or something. There's just other classes that do what it does better, most notably Archmagus. So there isn't really much of a need to end up bringing it out unless you're using a team that really specifically kind of wants to build into Undead or into 4 times Kedar like you might do for Underspire this week, for example. But aside from those kind of circumstances, probably not worth using. And this Friday we have no event, aka arena event, aka no event. Anyways, so as far as Soul Forge is concerned, we have one pretty good thing. Oddly enough, on the week that he's available, we cannot run him for Underworld. However, almost said Underspire. But we can't run him for Underworld this week. However, you probably see me using Guard's Avatar a lot for doing Underworld. And I do advise getting him. He's basically Rowan for every color that isn't Rowan, for brown, red, and yellow. And given that every single faction covers 2 colors, you will always be able to use either Rowan or Guard's Avatar if you want an armor-based boost ratio just to one-shot everything with for your Tuesday faction event. That's pretty much his only purpose in the current state of game, similar to... Well, actually, Rowan has a lot of other purposes, but this guy's only purpose for the most part is running Tuesday faction events. However, given the extremely wide range of colors that he covers, he tends to be able to be used in pretty much every single one. Technically this one as well, but he doesn't have his brown or yellow other guy synergy. That gives him 50% mana start, so not as worth running compared to other options. However, he does get used a lot for that. There are other alternatives, of course, but he's my personal favorite for running for it, so it's something worth considering due to his very high amount of AoE damage that only gets higher by the day as we keep getting more and more armor added to the game. So worth considering. Everything else that we have this week, pretty much not really that worthwhile. HP boost ratio just isn't the same compared to armor boost ratios. Every armor boost ratio in the game is just so much better compared to the HP ones, even compared to the more modern HP related ones. So who knows, maybe that won't be the case at some point, but as it currently stands, armor boost ratio is still way superior compared to HP. It's easier to lose your armor, but as long as you don't, you get way better value from the armor ones. As far as weapons are concerned, a lot of knick-knack stuff for the most part. Nothing really too relevant except for book. Course Blue Book, if you want to have that for, I would say Guild Wars, if we had any. It's been like 3 months. But if nothing else, technically Blue PvP you could technically run it for. I guess they're a bit less viable in the current state of the game, but, you know, they're still really good. Running a book against a pure color team is still very, very, very strong. Aside from that, if you're looking for any other kind of utility troop or a utility weapon to kind of have into the future, I would say Dead Gauntlet. Unless you're using something else, like I think for one of the teams I'm showing Bone Shield or something. But if you're looking for something for versatility into the future, Dead Gauntlet does get used occasionally. Not that often, but it gets used in 4 times Undead teams or even 3 times Undead teams depending on how you're building it. And this is obviously usable outside of purely Kedar compared to something like the Bone Shield, which is really good specifically this week, but only benefits from Kedar allies. Whereas something like the Bone Gauntlet will help you for other various kingdoms. Most notably Golvania, but there are a handful of other ones that are pretty undead dense as far as how many undeads they have. So let's get a little bit of synergy out there. So if you're looking for any other kind of utility weapon, you could end up doing that. Otherwise, anything else that you might want to get for completionist purposes. I kind of already mentioned it earlier, but this is the second to last week of that campaign. And with that being said, this is technically the first day that you can get the King Stormu Guard. We'll be going over him a little bit more in depth on stream tonight. We'll probably cover a video for him at some point. Don't currently have him, but we'll have him soon. But he's basically catches the bull with a 1 lower boost ratio, which I really wish they wouldn't have done. I really wish it would have been 2 to 1. But deals some damage to the first 2 enemies, boosted by its attack, life, and armor, and then explodes all lightning gems. The main interesting thing about this guy is he's going to have really good synergy with the Sphinx that just came out today. So I'm really curious to see how that will pan out, as that will leave a lot of spare lightning gems on the board that he will easily be able to go and explode. This guy can basically be summarized as lower damage Ketris that can't aim where he targets, but has the upside of actually having mana accumulation and extra turn potential. One of the biggest downsides of Ketris the Bull, especially in the current state of the game, a lot of troops have this issue. It has 0 follow-up. It might have a okay ability or a decent ability, a lot of troops in the game. However, if they're ending their turn, they tend to not be as good compared to things that have a extra turn potential. And while this guy on face value is less damage than Ketris the Bull, he does have extra turn potential. And with specific lightning gem synergies might actually have decent extra turn potential. He also has a mechanic somewhat similar to the Takshaka that we still have in drop table for the next 4 days. And that is being able to create gems every single turn. This is always pretty decent. We saw the skull ones do a pretty good job. We saw wild cards do pretty good. And now we have lightning gem. Of course, this can give you a decent amount of mana accumulation. Definitely not the best of the gem creations we had. I would definitely say Skull and Wild Card is definitely substantially better, but, 2 yellow lightning gems isn't the worst thing in the world, especially when you can go explode it all. Currently, it is not possible to have more than 1 of him. That won't be happening until free-to-play gets him, or anyone who didn't buy the pass, which is likely to be a few months from now at the earliest. However, at some point, you will be able to run, of course, 2, 3 of him to be able to create a bunch of lightning gems. Very similar to how you can kind of do it right now with the Takshaka, which I cannot reiterate enough. Do not leave this week, or actually not even this week, do not leave this next 4 days without your copy of Takshaka, as there is no timer here, but it is gone on Friday reset time, on basically end of Thursday. Highly, highly, highly advise getting that thing. It is so good. Anyways, most of his mana accumulation, his ability's pretty average, but his mana accumulation is amazing off his final trait. Anyways, is that everything? Let's go now into team. So, of course, all teams will be in the description below if you want to go and copy paste of them as per usual. Let's start all the way from the top with Invasion. So, Invasion, only restriction here is that you have to use pure monster with anything as hero. And the other restriction, well, not really restriction, but highly advised to end up using at least 1 copy of the Tower Rights Priestess. This thing gives you double score and will also itself have double magic. Though, of course, you're mostly just using it for its double score, which if you're not using it, you're getting 2 times less score, essentially. So definitely make sure at least 1 of them is on your team. It does not matter if it lives, it just matters that it is starting on your team. Though ideally it will live because it will do a lot of damage. You have access to Box Strider underneath monsters. This is likely to be your main mana accumulation. It ends up destroying a bunch of gems and tangles random enemy. Actually, that doesn't matter. Never mind. We're up against towers, so he's basically Thrall. For 8 mana instead of 6 without mana link. So he's basically just weaker Thrall in this context, as its Entangle does nothing, because they all have immune. But you just go and do 1 billion damage with your Priestess. Box Strider gets you all the mana. Megavore I had here just for armor tier, of course. If you need something cheaper, just go with the either double up on her or use that other one that we showed, that one brown-red other invasion monster. You can end up using him. And then we just went wand for mana accumulation. But of course, you could put whatever your preferred mana accumulation option is. For the lower rarity one, we actually went with, oddly enough, there's actually 2 weapons right now that have Monster Explode. Sharp Fang, which is the old version of it, and the new one, which is red-yellow. It is advised to use the previous version if you have it. If you don't have it, then yes, just using the one that we have right now that you can get pretty much for free. Or not for free, but 10 gems, 250 gems, whatever it is for the event into Invasion. You'll end up getting the weapon just from doing that, while also getting the troop and everything you need for the event. But yeah, that gives you a red-yellow version of it. The problem with the red-yellow one, though, is it has full mana block with Apophysis. Of course, you could always just drop that and run like Box Strider or something, and go Box Strider and then that weapon. But it's nice to have a little bit of skull pressure, especially if you have lower stats and kind of need that extra bit, a little bit of damage burst. But the other alternative would be go Box Strider instead of Apophysis, and go the newer Explodey weapon rather than the old one, if you don't have access to the old one. You can also, of course, just run Wand or something similar if you happen to have it, but I wanted to keep it lower rarity. Anyways, aside from that, as far as the low level range for the faction event, This is specifically for the Fang Moor faction, which is a red-blue restriction this Tuesday. With red-blue, of course, we have access to, well, the best red-blue troop there is, Tesla. And yeah, you can just Tesla spam until you win, using Tapon to get her a little bit of mana, and Wand because why not? Mostly using it for Dispel. There's quite a bit of Submerge, oddly enough, in Underspire, and this is mostly our anti-Submerge option. You can even go Dispel Hero class and not go Corsair, but I figured we'd go Corsair for that little bit extra blue, just to get their mana going just a little bit quicker. Aside from that, oh yeah. So since Takshaka is still in drop table, I did want to show at least one team with him. And if you guys have seen any of our streams the last week or the last few days, yeah, we've been running Stellaryx triple Takshaka quite a lot. It's basically Empower Stellaryx or Empower whatever you put there. You can put Tesla, you can put Diamantina, but it's basically Empower whatever you put in first slot almost every single time, like at least 50% of the time. On top of that, yeah, you don't even need to cast it like Leprechaun. Like Leprechaun is Empower ability, but then you have to cast it. You have to wait till, you know, you can end up clicking on it and all that. But you don't need to do that with this. It just instantly gives you your mana. You just go immediately into your Stellaryx, boom, dead, win. It is very absurdly good. It's good for Explore 12. It's good for running dailies. It's good for pretty much everything. I guess technically at the super, super high range, yeah, we'll fall off eventually. Obviously, insta-kill at a certain point has become a little bit better than it. But hey, if you want to, replace that Stellaryx with an Iron Gut or something. Place a Zolgoth there or something. Does anything like an extra turns or insta-kill spam. But yeah, it's kind of crazy what this can do. The triple wild card is definitely one of the best mana accumulation methods in the entire game, particularly for things that use all 6 colors. So yeah, duly advise getting yourself 1, 2, or 3 Takshakas. Really, really good. Ideally at least 2 if you can. Though of course it is a bit luck based, and Glory Gem Guild and VIP chest for the next 4 days. Anyways, next we have Peer Faction. This is of course just using the 5 faction troops that we have. Unfortunately, the 5th new faction troop has Fairy Fire for some reason, despite being an almost a purely Skull Bleed mechanic. It has Fairy Fire and no bleed, or was it just Fairy Fire? I don't remember, but whatever it is, it is pretty useless relative to what the rest of these guys are trying to do. So basically, you double up on Chief Dargon. There's 2 reasons for doing this. The main one is in case you lose one, you have a second one. But the other thing is you get a little bit more bleed. You inflict a bleed on a random enemy for every single red match. And of course, once they're all 4 bled, there's basically 10 free damage on all enemies per turn, specifically true damage. But yeah, you basically just boost up your attack over and over again. And worst comes to worst, this will be your team for the final fight, just all 3 of those. Next, we have the Shaman of Set. He chooses a color, creates a bunch of red equal to that number. So if there's 12 blue and you click on blue to create 12 red, pretty decent for that. Also has a little bit extra bleed. Also just used for its mana accumulation. And then we have the guy who helps you finish out the battle. Basically, after you're done spamming Chief Dargon a billion times to gain a bunch of attack, you then spam this thing to do a billion skulls. You can do it in between if you want to, but of course you ideally want to wait until you have a nice amount of attack stacked up, and then end up just spamming this, and then just go straight into mana accumulation, into skull spam, into trying to get your mana accumulation back up, and keep spamming those until you end up winning. And it's pretty much a pure faction. Overall, pretty straightforward. The pathing for this place is also very, very straightforward. It's basically just a straight line. Next, we have ourselves the Necromancy class event. This one, we specifically have to use Undead from Kedar, which is good because like 2/3 of this place is pretty much Undead. We were basically just going with Spam Azurus. Main reason for this is Purple Link. Purple Link into feeding this weapon. We're just running Archmages so we can kill it pretty quick. You just run whatever your preferred kill everything weapon is. And it's pretty much our game plan here. And if anything does revive or anything similar, this thing can end up getting you some skull matches, as you'll probably have a lot of excess purple mana. So you can end up doing that in order to match a bunch of skulls and get a little bit extra damage pressure on like the 100% revive Drake or anything similar that might be affecting the next class event. Next, we have ourselves the final little section here. We have ourselves the Underspire. I actually have 3 Underspire teams to show for once. Just to switch it up a little bit, because I do actually normally use 3 different Underspire teams. Actually, last week I think we used like 8 different ones. Mostly because the teams were kind of awkward for that event week. But I do kind of want to show 3, because there's basically 3 that you would kind of run. The one that you would run like super late into the faction, or the Underspire, I mean. The one that you would run like super early in it, because it's just quicker to just kill everything simultaneously. Almost like a Thursday class event in a sense. And then, which is why the team looks pretty similar in a sense. And then the low rarity team, for anyone who doesn't have all the higher rarity stuff. But anyways, let's go with the first one. So this first one that we're going with does use the Bone Shield I mentioned earlier, creates a bunch of purple and brown based on Kedar. This generally isn't too good, but on a Kedar restriction where you're forced to have to use a 4x Kedar team, not too bad. I am currently using Elementals here, though of course you can end up switching over to Necromancer in order to get more mana accumulation from it. Next we have ourselves the Gynosphinx. This thing is also going to be a pretty good mana accumulator. Not only does it have jumbling on the board, but it create those 5 lightning gems. The only big downside about its lightning gem mechanic is you don't get to choose like the ratio of yellow and blue. So sometimes it just won't really give you what you need. Like, let's say you need a lot of yellow like this team does. It might end up doing like 4 blue lightning gems, which isn't horrible because they're going to be destroying stuff. But, you know, if you're actually matching them, you're getting blue mana for the most part, not really yellow, other than the path that they're going to destroy. So you might get a little bit less mana from time to time from it, but still going to be overall pretty good. And also has Brown Link for some reason. Next we have some Self-Rafaman, which is basically going to be for cleanse. Has that nice little skull pressure. And we're just going to have a little bit of damage from that. Mostly using it to cleanse everything and just get a little bit of skulls. He does do a little bit of purple too, but he's the only one that uses it and just feeds back into himself. And then we have our backup plan. If everything else fails, we have Deathmark. We 4 times Deathmark the entire enemy team, then go win. That's pretty much the whole plan there. It also has Curse and Disease on itself, the most noteworthy one being Curse. So you don't even need a proper cursor. She could do it herself if she really has to. And you're going to get extra brown from this for some reason. So I'll help her out a little bit. Anyways, next thing we have here is spam Gynosphinx. This thing is going to be our primary mana accumulator, and we're just doing that into the best AoE weapon we have, in this case being Deathbringer. As far as the final team that we have here, this one ends up using the very cheap Tome Knights. This thing is actually pretty good. It almost looks like a faction troop, except it's actually not a faction troop. It destroys a column and then gains a bunch of armor and attack. Very similar premise to a lot of faction troops out there, but just happens to be a standard kingdom troop for some reason. And then it's also boosted by yellow, so really good boost ratio. This late in the game doesn't really do that much, but you know, this is the early game team, so you're going to gain a lot more value from that than you would this late in the game. So if you end up destroying a column with like 4 yellow in it, that's 8 extra attack and armor, which could definitely stack up to be a lot. But the main premise here is that the fact that it gains a ton of attack while gaining barrier. This thing essentially just keeps tanking, has a bunch of skull reduction, and you just keep boosting up its armor, keep boosting up its attack. It just keeps getting beefier, keeps getting barrier, so it's never taking damage, and then you just kill it once it has enough skull damage. With that skull damage, you can throw whatever your best skull spammer is. I do use a legend here, but if you don't have Keeper of Souls, just put like the skeleton here, the really cheap one, whatever you have. Keeper of Souls is just the mid-range option. Obviously, skeleton would be the cheapest option. Keeper Souls or Bone Dragon is the middle option, and Rathaman is the high rarity option, essentially. So those are like the main 3 that you kind of want to build around. Regardless, in the middle range, though, you do have access to Apophysis. This has Empower into Convert to Skull, so you can convert all your greens to skulls, give a little bit of life to your first slot to keep it even more bulky if it wasn't already going to die. It is now very extremely not going to die, and that's pretty much the whole premise here. And since AoE is pretty good, I just threw that into the cheaper team, so it can help end up speeding through the earlier fights a little bit. Also, if you do want to get a little bit more of a team bonus, because you might end up needing those stats, you can switch out Archmages for Necromancer, and that will give you a 4 times Kedar bonus as well. You could have that for either of the teams, or any of the teams there. More so for the first and third one, as they will gain a lot more benefit from having a pure Kedar team. So if you want those little bit extra stats, you can go down that route, but you are going to be giving up the effects of the better hero classes, like Archmages for this one, or super tanky Elementalists for the other one. But if you find you need the stats and or mana accumulation a little bit more, you can end up doing it with the other one, so always an option if you want to consider it. Anyways, guys, all those will be in the description below if you want to go and copy-paste any of them. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Definitely feel free to leave a like on the video. Helps a lot and is greatly appreciated. And tonight on stream here on the channel, about around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be going over the new Mythic that technically came out today. And we'll get to see how it does with the new Sphinx, as they are basically the 2 best lightning gem mechanics in the game. More so her, out of anything. It's very similar to Daughter of Time, so curious to see how that overall ends up panning out. Anyways, guys, have a wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone, and best of luck if you're still trying for the Takshaka.